Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video where I'm going to be talking about the Iran-Israel conflict and America's involvement and the leak of reports that the US strikes have not quite achieved what the Trump administration have been claiming and all the controversy surrounding that. So let's get started. We're going to push off with Iran's foreign minister saying this on uranium enrichment. Quote, "We made great efforts to achieve this technology and our scientists paid a heavy price. Our people endured sanctions and war was imposed on us over this. Naturally, no one in Iran will give up this technology." So they are being quite strong in response to the desire to set back the Iranian nuclear project by, well, the claim has been various, hasn't it, concerning how long it's going to be delayed by. But the latest evidence points that it's not going to be very much. The IAEA, International Atomic Energy Association chief Rafael Grossi urges Iran to clarify the status of every gram of enriched uranium. Quote, "I don't know where it's stored. My job is to know." He calls for the immediate resumption of IAEA activities in the country. So basically, we're going to find out that the strikes didn't do what the Americans claimed they did, and that there's possibly still 400 kilograms of enriched uranium floating about somewhere. And Grossi here is saying, I need to know where it is. It's the job of the IAEA to do this. Well, turns out Iran's parliament has not only approved a bill to suspend cooperation with the IAEA, but actually they've just voted on it this morning, and along with Parliament chanting death to America, death to Israel, they also voted to suspend cooperation with the IAEA, so it'll have no jurisdiction anymore in Iran. This has then set back, diplomatic, the chance of diplomatic, I think, solution to this problem in Iran by some time, because all diplomacy will involve the IAEA having jurisdiction in Iran to check where the Iranians are with their nuclear activities. Okay, so the US Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth has said, "From everything we've seen, and I've seen it all, our bombing campaign wiped out Iran's ability to build a nuclear weapon. Their impact now lies buried under mountains of debris. Anyone downplaying this is just trying to undermine the president." Okay, that's pretty strong rhetoric there. So we have heard from the president and from Hegseth and others that the American strikes obliterated, and that's a word that was used most commonly, obliterated the Iranian capabilities and their facilities in Fordo particularly, but also in a couple of other places, Natanz and Isfahan. Now, what's the reality? Well, it's very difficult to know, because the House and the Senate's classified briefing, I think maybe a House one as well, have both been cancelled, or certainly the Senate one was cancelled. So that's got to tell you something. Chris Murphy here saying, probably not a coincidence Trump cancelled the Senate classified briefing for this afternoon, as CNN had an exclusive. Early US intelligence suggests American strikes did not destroy Iran's nuclear sites and likely only set the program back by months, sources say. So that's what we're going to look at. Pat Ryan here says that, and he's a veteran in the House of Representatives. Trump just cancelled a classified House briefing, yes, so it was Senate and House, on the Iran strikes with zero explanation. The real reason? He claims he destroyed all nuclear facilities and capability. His team knows they can't back up his bluster and BS. Here's what they're scared will ask. Immediately after the strikes, Trump claimed the nuclear facilities were completely and totally obliterated. He lied and likely still doesn't fully know the battle damage assessment. What he does know is that an unsuccessful strike dramatically increases the chance Iran races to break out. Vance admitted they have no clue about the status of 900 pounds of highly enriched uranium. The entire logic of the attack was that Iran was imminently building a nuclear weapon. If that's the case, not that they've shared the intel, then 900 pounds of missing HEU is a huge problem. They can't get their briefers on the same page. Every one of the people who is supposed to come today has a different conclusion on how close Iran was to breaking out and on how successful the operation was. Tulsi Gabbard probably still doesn't know it was cancelled. By the way, there are rumours that she's going to get the sack, Tulsi Gabbard. Jake Bro talked about this, in that some of the people who are anti-Ukraine, who are kind of pro-Russia, are going by the wayside at the moment. Whether that be Tucker Carlson or, you could say Elon Musk, Steve Bannon, Tulsi Gabbard. They're going by the wayside, but it's not over their positions on Russia, because of course the Trump administration is largely in accordance with that, but it's on their positions in support of Iran. And this is what I've talked about previously, that my hopes of this whole debacle concerning the American strikes on Iran is that MAGA Republicans recognize that Iran is deeply in bed with Russia, that they are aligned, that they are full-on allies. And if you're against Iran, then you should be against Russia. So these people getting pushed out are getting pushed out because they're pro-Iran or kind of anti-US strikes on Iran, and therefore they're deemed as kind of pro-Iran. They're not getting pushed out because they're pro-Russia, but hopefully that connection is made. A few other questions I had prepared, says Pat Ryan. How are we protecting US troops in the region from the PMF and other militias? How are we ensuring we keep the Strait of Hormuz open? Is there an elevated risk to the homeland? And something I probably should have started with, his team sure as hell wasn't ready to explain to Congress how the strike was constitutional, or why they broke long-standing precedent and only briefed Republican members of the bipartisan Gang of Eight prior to the strike. So I'm hoping for peace. I'm praying for peace, but I will not, and the American people cannot, take Trump's lies on a topic of this magnitude sitting down. Okay, so the Senate and the House briefings were cancelled, and that's because the battle damage assessment is not looking particularly good. So this is from CNN, and Shashank Joshi has picked this out as being important. The quote, the US strikes on 3 of Iran's nuclear facilities last weekend did not destroy the core components of the country's nuclear program and likely only set it back by months, according to an early US DIA intelligence assessment. Wow, he says. Quote, 2 of the people familiar with the assessment said Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium was not destroyed. 1 of the people said the centrifuges are largely intact. The DIA assessment is that the US set them back maybe a few months tops. And a caveat, though, it is still early for the US to have a comprehensive picture of the impact of the strikes, and none of the sources described how the DIA assessment compares to the view of other agencies in the intelligence community. Shashank Joshi then continues, this is also very important, depending on what the facilities do. Quote, US officials believe Iran also maintains secret nuclear facilities that were not targeted in the strike and remain operational, according to 2 sources familiar with the matter. And he says, Shashank Joshi, this is a devastating conclusion if it is correct. Quote, after the US bombing run and days of attacks by the Israeli Air Force, the report by the Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA, estimated that the program was delayed less than 6 months. The DIA report also said much of Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium was moved before the strikes, which destroyed little of the material. Some may have been moved to secret sites. Now, I guess the Americans will have 2 options here. One, to kind of draw a line in the sand and say, okay, we've done that, we'll move on, we'll go for diplomacy. The other is, and there's some indications that Trump may be amenable to this, that the Americans may well strike again if they deem it necessary. So Chris Murphy then says, CNN, the New York Times, and the Associated Press and the Washington Post have now all confirmed, quote, the early findings conclude that Trump's strikes over the weekend set back Iran's nuclear program by only a few months. National security incompetence, he says. Okay, so this isn't going down particularly well with critics of the strikes, or critics of the way the government went about the strikes. So you can be in favour of the strikes, but say it wasn't constitutional, you didn't ask for Congress's permission, which, if you're going to do it unilaterally, the kind of agreement is, or the law says in the US, that there has to be an imminent threat to the US. And that's what was missing. There was no evidence that the threat was imminent. Now, I was justifying the strikes previously by saying it doesn't matter whether they're imminent or not, but my position was nothing to do with US constitutionality. And I was just looking at it as a random British guy or random human saying, I don't want a dictatorial theocracy to have nuclear weapons. And so I just about justify that. And I've changed my opinion to saying I just about don't justify it, but it could go either way. Now, as far as my theorizing goes, it has nothing to do with the constitutionality. That's a further argument that is kind of a procedural one, and it might have been that the Americans, or that Trump was deciding not to go down that route, because the last time they went down the constitutional route was with Obama with Syria, and they voted against it. And he was thinking, well, we're not going to get it through Congress, so let's just do it anyway and say that there's an imminent threat to the US, even though there was no evidence of that. So yeah, that constitutionality argument, I think, will carry on, and it is a good argument. There's clearly an issue there, I would suggest. Right, so here, just to give you some more mainstream media, here's a Guardian saying US strikes on Iran's nuclear sites only set the program back by months, say the Pentagon. So an initial classified US assessment of Donald Trump's strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities over the weekend says they did not destroy two of the sites and only likely set back the nuclear program by a few months, according to two people familiar with the report. So basically what happened is there's been a leak of the report. So the report produced by the DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, the intelligence arm of the Pentagon, concluded key components of the nuclear program, including centrifuges, were capable of being restarted within months. There's a couple of things going on here. You might have a little bit of a pushback from the Pentagon on the US Trump administration, where the Pentagon is flexing a little bit, leaking. We've had issues with leaks before, and Pete Hegseth said he's coming down hard on them, and there were people who were fired, so on and so forth. I get the sense that the purges in the Pentagon have been getting rid of competent people in favor of trying to get in ideologically aligned people, anti-woke, culture wars type Pete Hegseths, the Pete Hegseths of the world. Fox News, let's have a go about this and that, and DEI. That's what they're trying to put into the Pentagon. The Pentagon maybe is pushing back, and there are leaks coming out. Now, this is it doesn't look like they're leaking untruths. When you leak things, the idea is that this is what is genuinely believed by, in this case, the Pentagon and the DIA. So it's not that this is lies. So the people like Fox News and the Trump administration have two options here. Well, they have several options. Do they just say this is untrue, and in doing so will have to say it's a lie, or do they try and divert attention away from the content and talk about the leakers? Now, we're going to talk about that in a wee while, because that's exactly what Fox News is doing. But anyway, back to this. The report also found that much of Iran's stockpile of highly enriched uranium that could be put to use for a possible nuclear weapon was moved before the strikes, may have been moved to other secret nuclear sites maintained by Iran. The findings by the DIA, which were based on a preliminary battle damage assessment conducted by US Central Command, which oversees US military operations in the Middle East, suggests Trump's declaration about the sites being obliterated may have been overstated. So on and so forth. So you get the idea. It's not looking like the bombastic claims of Trump and Hegseth, that those claims are correct. Now, we have a few other people throwing in their tuppence in terms of intelligence or open source intelligence assessments. So the Institute for Science and International Security has published an analysis of the high resolution imagery of the same tunnel linked to the ENTC facility in Esfahan. So previously, this particular source had talked about, prior to the US strikes, unusual activity around the tunnels, as they are probably filling up the tunnels with gravel or whatever, making sure that they are protected, as much as maybe removing materials or sensitive equipment or whatever. So indeed, similar to Fordo, the site was undergoing a sealing process involving the covering of all three entrances with soil. Dump trucks were observed at the site on June the 20th. The imagery from June the 22nd, there is confirmation that all three entrances were struck by American Tomahawk missiles. So not only were there 14 massive ordnance penetrator bombs dropped by the B-2 bombers, but submarines sent off about 30 Tomahawk missiles to hit two of these other sites, one of them being Esfahan, talked about here. So the central entrance completely collapsed while the others sustained significant damage. However, the strike connected to the pre-existing sealing efforts does not change the fact that the entrances can now potentially be cleared and reopened, allowing access to whatever may have survived the operation inside. So these strikes by Tomahawks on the site here may well have done some damage to that which is above the ground, buildings and parts of the facility. But any damage to the tunnels below is going to be minimal, and they may well have blown up the entrances, but the Iranians were sealing up the entrances. So the question is, why were the Israelis sealing up the entrances? Well, it turns out that this is widely reported. New York Times reported that the Pentagon worked up a ruse. Well, okay, essentially the Iranians were doing what they're doing because Donald Trump was telegraphing this on social media. And he was telegraphing it to the point that, as this article says, or New York Times said, the Pentagon worked up a ruse to fool Iran on the strikes because they feared Trump would give it away on social media. There's this issue that Trump is a blabbermouth. And he talks about it like he just posted secret messages, private messages from Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, on Truth Social. He just blasts anything on Truth Social and doesn't give a damn about operational security. And this happened previously as well. I can't remember what it was over, but there was another OPSEC issue to do with Trump earlier in the last 5 months, something else that he did. But anyway, here we've got the issue of the American military having to change their planning because they're worried about Trump saying X, Y, and Z. So, all the Iranians need to do to work out what the Americans are going to do militarily is have an idea of maybe get invited on some Signal group chats by Pete Hegseth and Mike Walls, although Mike Walls is no more, or just look at Trump's Truth Social feed. So they end up then sealing up the entrances, and then that could well have done a good job in somewhat protecting the tunnels behind. Now, Defmon here says the reason. Okay, so first of all, he's referring to this. Let's give a quote from an article. DIA assesses that Iran nuclear program could be back online in matters of months, from 1 to 2 months on the low end to less than a year on the high end. This is a preliminary intelligence assessment and is deemed low confidence in intelligence parlance. It is based, I'm told, on satellite images and SIGINT, so signals intelligence of where they're intercepting phone calls, radio messages, emails, whatever, obtained since the strikes. The focus on the report is on the BDA battle damage assessment at Fordo. So Defmon says the reason the confidence is low is a lack of data. So this is really important. It's very easy to get onto what the Pentagon say and say, see, it was all a failure, look. But actually, it's all about the confidence in the data, and it's still really early, right? So Defmon says they simply don't have enough information to know yet. Despite that, the US president proclaims complete destruction, an assessment likely based more on his wishes than any intelligence. So on the one hand, be careful not to completely take on board what the leaked battle damage assessment is, because it's with low confidence, and they just simply don't know enough of the details yet to make a really firm judgment as to what has been destroyed in these facilities. But on the other hand, Trump straight away said they're obliterated. So you should have absolutely, you talk about low confidence, you should have virtually zero confidence that his claims are, well, that he knows anything on which to judge those, on which to base those claims. So he almost certainly plucked the claim that these facilities were obliterated out of his wishful thinking mind or posterior. Now it might be true, they might have obliterated them, but we don't have the data to be able to make that judgment yet. And yet there Trump was, I think, dangerously making that judgment. He should have just kept stum for days and days until he got a much better sense of what had happened, because then he ends up looking like a fool, and then they've got to try and work their way around this problem, such as, do they attack the messenger, do they attack the leaker, rather than not needing to have to explain why Trump and Hegseth said these huge bombastic claims and the evidence doesn't support it. You just wait. Don't make the bombastic claims saying we're going to wait to look at battle damage assessment and intelligence before we make a judgment on how successful these were. And then if they're not so successful, you say, it looks at, unfortunately, like blah, blah, blah. It's not to cast any aspersions on these pilots and the work that they did. They did exactly what they planned on doing in terms of releasing the bombs, hitting the right places. It's just that the bombs were unable to deal out the damage that we were hoping. That's how you deal with it. And then you can decide whether you need to do more bombing raids, but then you're kind of working out whether that would be far too politically controversial. But they've got themselves in a mess precisely because they make these overconfident claims, a bit like Trump was making with regard to the ceasefire. Just calm down. Make your claims after you've got the knowledge of these things happening. Don't just be overconfident in your predictions. Here's Michael McCall, who is the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee.
This is what we say, quote, the U.S. military strikes on 3 of Iran's nuclear facilities last weekend did not destroy the core components of the country's nuclear program and likely only set it back by months, according to the intelligence assessment. It was produced by the Defense Intelligence Agency, the Pentagon's intelligence arm. Now, worth noting, Caroline Levit, the White House spokesperson, pushed back against this report, said it was wrong.
See that in a second.
I'm interested to know your reaction to this, considering that President Trump has repeatedly said that the program was, quote, completely obliterated.
Well, it's unfortunate that intelligence gets leaked so quickly in this administration. I understand the president's frustration. Having said that, it did cause significant damage. And I think that's important in terms of a time to negotiate a peaceful resolution. However, and I've been briefed on this plan in the past, it was never to completely destroy these 3 facilities, but rather cause significant damage. But it was always known to be a temporary setback.
Is this a case of post hoc rationalizing or kind of post hoc changing the goalposts? It was never designed to obliterate. They've obliterated. We've done exactly what we said. It was never designed to. So I do understand the frustration of leaks, right? That is a genuine frustration. But I think there's a bit of changing the goalposts here,
where they could then rebuild the centrifuges. I think right now the key is to keep applying the pressure, the leverage.
So why do you think the president is saying what he's saying in public, if that's the case?
Well, because it did cause significant damage, and he had 12, 30,000-pound bombs being dropped.
Yeah, completely and totally obliterating is different to significant damage. That is a false, that's not on McCall. You're trying to save the president's face here, I think, and minimize the issues that Trump has himself caused.
It's all a matter of semantics. I think the president, thinking it caused.
You can't just say semantics. You can't just say one thing is something and it's actually something completely different. And you're like, well, it's just semantics. I can't accuse a politician of being a paedophile, right? And they're not a paedophile. And I just go, semantics. Semantics. You say potato, I say paedophile. What?
It completely obliterated. Look, it caused significant damage. It was a temporary setback.
Yeah. Okay. So reviving Iran's nuclear program could take years, says Steve Witkoff, so the envoy to the Middle East. In all three cases, most of the centrifuges were damaged or destroyed to the point of reviving the program would be extremely difficult. In my opinion, it's a long process that could take years, says a real estate mogul. Brilliant. I'd probably wait for a proper battle damage assessment first, mate. Shashank Joshi, the defense correspondent from The Economist, here referring to the Financial Times. This is how you get distorted intelligence assessments. Where dissenting analysis is deterred or suppressed. Pete Hegseth says, anyone who says the bombs were not devastating is just trying to undermine the president and the successful mission. So it's looking like there's this real pushback against dissenting views, but the dissenting views appear to be based on actual intelligence reports, albeit leaked from the DIA. This is back to the kind of Tulsi Gabbard situation of getting a report on the Venezuelan gangs. The intelligence report to you given by these experts suggests, or not, doesn't suggest, it concludes that the Venezuelan government didn't have anything to do with Tren de Aragua being, scare quotes, sent to the US to invade the US and blah, blah, blah. There's no evidence of that. So what does she do? Instead of taking that report and delivering it upwards to the command, to Trump and Stephen Miller, she fires the people that did the report, which means that if you report something to me that I don't want to hear, you'll get fired. So Pete Hegseth is saying anyone who says the bombs were not devastating is just trying to undermine the president and the successful mission. And it's got that ring to it, and I just don't like it. Don't like it at all. And this is all, playing on Trump, with Trump's sense of, well, first of all, whether he's going to get the Nobel Peace Prize. But it's so bizarre. Trump is just bizarre. This is what he puts on Truth Social, as if this is going to get him the Nobel Peace Prize.
Bomb, bomb, Iran. Bomb, 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 Iran. Bomb, bomb, bomb.
So he then releases a video of, the of B-2 bombers going up in the air to the sound of the Beach Boys, Bob Iran, bomb, 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 Iran. As I deserve the Nobel Peace Prize. Yay me. Anyway, there you go. Based on everything we've seen, and I've seen it all, our bombing campaigns obliterated Iran's ability to create nuclear weapons. Our massive bombs hit exactly the right spots at each target and worked perfectly. The impact of those bombs is buried under a mountain of rubble in Iran, so anyone who says the bombs are not devastating is just trying to undermine the president and the successful mission. So Trump is reiterating Pete Hegseth's defense of Trump and claims that everything was, obliterated. But of course, this briefing doesn't suggest that at all, or this report. This is Mark Kelly, the senator from Arizona, who was in the hat to be the vice president under Kamala Harris. It ended up obviously going to Tim Walz as the nominee.
We don't know where the uranium is. We don't know if we destroy these sites. And we don't know if the Iranians are going to race to the development of a nuclear weapon, and we wind up with a situation that's similar to what we're dealing with North Korea. The challenge, though, is where's the president getting his advice from? He doesn't have a national security advisor. He has a DNI that doesn't show up to all the meetings, and he's got Pete Hegseth. And I see that as a big problem. I don't know whether you...
This is a really, really important point. It's super important. Like, I keep asking you or not asking you, just exhorting to the ether. Like, where's Trump getting his information from? Because he doesn't have experts around him, and he doesn't do any reading, and he doesn't take intelligence briefings. His DNI, Tulsi Gabbard, has gone AWOL and is likely to be sacked. He's listened to Pete Kegsbreath. Yeah. So, Trump says if Iran rebuilds its uranium enrichment facilities, the US will attack again. The IAEA chief, Grossi, says Iran informed me that they had taken protective measures on enriched uranium stock, but now they're not going to be working with the IAEA. Trump has said Iran and Israel were like two kids in a school fight. Where have you heard that before? That's what he said about Ukraine and Russia. Two kids in a school fight. Let them fight for 2 to 3 minutes, and then you see them stop. Yeah, brilliant. Well done. That is just insulting. There is a lot of progress on Gaza. Iran and Israel will not be fighting each other. Witkoff told me that Gaza is very close. Very close to having even more people genocided. Trump, we will discuss his difficulties with Zelensky. He is a nice guy. So this is he's at NATO. So I'm just going to read you a bunch of things which will include Iran. Trump on NATO's Article 5, we are with them all the way. That's slightly better than what he said last night in the plane. The ceasefire is doing very good. I'm proud of Israel. They brought their planes back. The last thing Iran wants to do is to enrich anything. Iran wants to do is to enrich anything. They want to recover. Can you imagine after all this, Iran says, let's do a bomb. This was a victory for Iran too. They have a country. Israel was also hit very hard. Those ballistic missiles hit them hard. Bibi should be proud. Trump on Iran's facilities. The flame is all underground. They did not have a chance to get anything out. I think the Iran nuclear plans have been set back decades. I think Iran will not do the nuke thing again. They will take their oil. The hit on Iran ended the war. So he's like being really maximalist in his claims here. Like set back decades, it destroyed everything. Iran won't do the nuke thing again, etc., etc., etc. Absolutely, incredible claims heard there. Now, Caroline Levit, the White House press secretary, said in a statement that effectively, by implication, the CNN claims were actually true. Let's have a look at her statement. This alleged assessment is flat out wrong and was classified as top secret, but was still leaked to CNN by an anonymous low-level loser in the intelligence community. The leaking of this alleged assessment is a clear attempt to demean President Trump and discredit the brave fighter pilots who conducted a perfectly executed mission to obliterate Iran's nuclear program. Everyone knows what happens when you drop 14 30,000-pound bombs perfectly on their targets. Total obliteration. So she is doubling down. So, it's not that these things weren't leaked. They were leaked. CNN's not lying. But she's saying, Caroline Levit is saying that the assessments are flat out wrong. So this is going to be very interesting because you're going to have an issue that if this is genuinely what the DIA is concluding, then how's that report going to be dealt with by Hegseth and Trump? Because Caroline Levit is saying this is flat out wrong. So we're going to have a situation of the sort that we saw with Tulsi Gabbard, where you're going to have to go away and redo the report because it doesn't conclude what we want it to conclude. If this report now comes up formally, it will be, and it says what the leakers say it says, it will be so supremely embarrassing for all of these people. It cannot be released, right? It just can't. So here Caroline Levit is saying total obliteration, and that essentially the report is a lie. Now, Jesse Waters takes from Fox News. I completely dislike this guy. Takes a slightly different approach. This is how Fox News is dealing with the leak claim.
Response. All right, Jesse, the media leak. You gutless losers, the president said to CNN, to the applause of millions of Americans. And what do you make of this leak? The New York Times trying to downplay the effects. Talk to us about the media landscape.
Well, they're saying the bombs don't work. I mean, this was a 30,000-pound bomb. If these bombs don't work.
Nobody's saying they don't work. People are saying they work. They were hit right on target. It's just that is very deep underground, and the Iranians have built those bunkers better than any in the world, apparently. They have the best bomb-resistant civil engineering going. 3 different types of reinforcement going on underneath. So the pilots did brilliantly. The bombs, no doubt, did brilliantly. It's just some were saying that they wouldn't be enough to take out these facilities, and that's why you need a tactical nuke. So he's just barking up the wrong tree there.
then you should try this guy who leaked it for treason. Because it just tells the entire world, the people that don't have nukes, let's go to your nearest mountain range and start enriching uranium. The United States can't do anything about it. That's probably the most serious leak I've ever seen. Now, I don't even believe it because the...
And he's adding at the end, I don't believe it. But his approach is, as I said earlier, to attack the leaker. It's like, let's divert it from the issues of what's being said and talk about the fact that someone's actually come out and said it.
The person who wrote it is the same journalist who wrote the Hunter Biden laptop is Russia disinformation. So to me, it sounds like another hoax.
Response.
And there you go, typical sort of Fox News approach there. And then here's another Fox News one. They leaked it, but it's false. So they leaked it, so they leaked a lie. Got it. And it's the idea that if it's false, you're leaking a lie. Like, it just doesn't make any sense.
Thank you. I need Defense you to clarify for me. The Defense Intelligence Agency. So the Defense Department, they don't have eyes on this like our IC community does. It was a premature leak, and without question, it needs to be investigated. This kind of information cannot be leaked. And because you have fake news like CNN running with the story, and it's absolutely false.
They were salivating.
Yes. Fake news. That is just, anyway.
Thank you. I need you.
So there you go. That's the reaction from certain media outlets. And then we had this interest. So essentially, I've said all I need to say on that. You know, battle damage assessment. It's probably too early to be too confident. However, it doesn't look like the bombs did what they were hoping they would do, which is unsurprising because these things were buried deep, and the Iranians had time to remove the enriched uranium and to seal up entrances and so on and so forth. And that means that the Trump administration are going to have to do some serious mitigation of these leaks and to get back control of this news cycle. It's not looking good for them at the moment. But Fox News are obviously doing the best they can to help them out. Okay, so Matt Gaetz has texts that were exposed mid-flight. This is fascinating. So a guy sitting behind Matt Gaetz on a plane took a video of Matt Gaetz going through his messages to someone called Mum, and he recorded this and has released these. Now, I mean, this is quite the leak. Matt Gaetz obviously used to be in Congress as a representative, but then as he was running for AG, it all came out that all the sex trafficking and stuff came out. So now he's gone to be a presenter on OAN, a news channel to the right of Fox. So this is a quick synopsis of what his texts showed. The passenger allegedly sitting behind Matt Gaetz caught a full view of his screen, and he was texting someone saved as Mom. Here's what the leaked messages revealed. These are all quotes. Iran's nuclear program posed no threat to the US. North Korea's actually does. Iran has been 3 months away from nukes since 1992. They had surrendered their intercontinental ballistic missile program in 2003. They have done no R&D on its re-entry capability. Clinton had a good Iran policy. I'll move to my fully paid for condo in Paradise, Israel. I'm happily married man with a son on the way, 2 penthouse condos, a 1-to-1 real estate asset to debt ratio, and 500,000 in my bank account cash. I guess I'll keep hitting it till I die. Not verified yet, but how many people drop foreign policy takes to Mum mid-flight? So yeah, we'll have to see what comes out from that. But it doesn't look like it was his mum. And just a quick note on Trump's little outburst yesterday. This is fascinating. So whoever this source says, when I saw this clip of Trump dropping the FBomb, this was the first thing I thought of. I think this is really interesting. So this is, I don't know what book or transcript this is taken from, but a question is asked to Gates. I don't know who Gates is. It might have been the previous, what was he? Not Secretary of State, National Security Council. Anyway, was there anybody that George Bush actively disliked? To which Gates said Shamir, But I will say this. Every president I worked for at some point in his presidency would get so pissed off at the Israelis that he couldn't speak. It didn't matter whether it was Jimmy Carter or Jerry Ford or Ronald Reagan or George Bush. Something would happen and they would just absolutely go screw themselves right into the ceiling. They were so angry and they'd sort of rant and rave around the Oval Office. I think it was their frustration about knowing that there was so little they could do about it because of domestic politics and everything else that was so frustrating to them. But he did not, I think, care very much for Shamir. I'm trying to think of others, but I can't think of any others. In other words, every American president comes to this point where there's so much lobbying by the Israelis in Congress. There's so much manipulation of the American political scene by the Israelis successfully that it gets really, really frustrating for presidents because they want to do something that goes against the Israeli wishes, but they kind of feel that they can't because of this kind of scenario. And they just get really, really angry. And then last night or yesterday, we had Trump losing the plot because Netanyahu appears to have just been doing what he wants. There's a ceasefire calls, he goes and bombs Iran. Now, that gets Trump really angry. And actually, there is now an understanding that Trump did get the planes turned around in midair. Like he was that angry with Netanyahu that they might have been on another bombing run, the Israeli planes, and they did turn around and return to Israel. So, Trump did manage to achieve that. I presume that's, I don't know, that's a good thing. I don't want to get into the long weeds of whether continued strikes are a good thing. Now, Krishna Guru Murthy from Channel 4 News, I think, sums it up pretty neatly here.
President Trump ordered Benjamin Netanyahu to turn his planes around midair and stop bombing Iran after a massive attack on Tehran. The Iranians said over 100 people were killed in the last 24 hours. Iran also had a final attack on Israel, which killed at least 4 people. And now all 3 players are declaring victory after 12 days of war. Netanyahu hoping this will make him Israel's Churchill. Trump hoping for a Nobel Peace Prize. And the Iranian Ayatollah holding on to power, still believed to have 400 kilograms of enriched uranium. Tonight, will the war lead to real talks, or was it all just to buy some time? President Trump...
I mean, where are we now? Where are we back to? What has been achieved? Iran now not doing any collaboration with the IAEA. So where does that leave diplomacy? The Iranian military has no doubt been degraded. Their nuclear capability has probably been somewhat degraded, at least somewhat degraded, but not hugely so. And that might push Iran further into an entrenchment of their original positions of trying to enrich uranium, etc., etc. And then Israel probably just feel emboldened, to be honest. They appear to have got away with this whilst also committing genocide in Gaza. And no one quite knows what to do with Israel at the moment. It's all a crazy mess, and I guess we'll sift through all the data and try and come to some kind of coherent explanation. But anyway, that's where we're at the moment. I thought I'd give you the full update. Thanks for watching. Really appreciate your support. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.